Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. And it's not just any other day, is it? No, it's the final day of the 2024-2025 Premier League season, meaning final day of the Fantasy Premier League season as well. And as such, I really do hope that all of you today get the overall rank finish you would like, and whatever that target is, you achieve it, and also get some mini league wins under your belt to go alongside. To start with, a heartfelt thank you from me, because I've received a huge amount of positive support over the last 9 or 10 months, and it does not go amiss, even if it's just a single like on a video, a subscribe, and some of you are so kind to even comment on that too on a regular basis. It really is appreciated, and it's had a wonderful and brilliant impact on my life, right? A huge positive one. For that, I'm very, very, very thankful, and that's that covered, so thank you very much. In today's edition of SYP, I have for you a look at the forwards, pretty much all of them, midfielders, pretty much all of them, defenders, in a slightly different fashion, benching dilemmas, assistant manager, and captaincy. So we've pretty much got everything you need covered in a SYP today, and I very much look forward to getting into it one last time for the season. Finally, before I end the introduction, if you do enjoy the video, do drop a like on it. And for the thousands of you who have not subscribed yet that watch regularly, better late than never, right? So you can go and click that button right now. That would be magnificent. Without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. Across the next two slides are all the forwards that I thought necessary to discuss, and as such, I share my opinion on all of those, whether you're looking to buy or sell them. Personally, I do not think Alexander Isak is going to start, and this is more so if we don't get a leak and you have to make a decision. I personally don't think he's going to start. We'll probably get told if he's at the ground or not, and then maybe from there we get something. And if he's there, especially like if he travels with them and comes in with them, then yeah, he probably starts, right? Even if we don't get a definitive leak. But on the assumption we don't get anything, I personally don't think he starts for similar reasons to the ones I discussed in EYN, right? The turnaround from the Arsenal game is quick. It's just a week. The fact he had to go for a scan, I know it's a precautionary measure, but he still had to go for a scan, right? There's still something in that. He didn't play such a big game away at the Emirates, and he's been nursing an injury clearly for a while. He's already going to have surgery at the end of the season. I think that Eddie Howe would fancy them to get the job done without him, even though he's obviously such a huge benefit to them to have, right? But even with that, I personally don't think he's going to play. So if you have to choose, I would say you can move him on without too much fear of him starting. Also, he's already at like 600-ish K transfers out. So the more that goes out, the less it's going to hurt your rank in terms of EO. Obviously, like that means the opportunity of owning him and him hauling is higher, but at least like the downside is certainly getting protected by the second, because quite literally every second more and more and more and more people are selling him, right? At least you've got that going for you. Is Chris Wood sellable? I've seen him some front lines. I think yes. These games, because it is very much just, this is a cup game, right? Like Chelsea win, we get Champions League. Forest win, maybe they get Champions League, right? But if they don't, then they definitely don't. And they want to put themselves in a position to at least get somewhat lucky. Elite managers speak about this all the time. Like, it's not regular football. It's a game of moments, and there's other things that come into play. Luck, the ability in both boxes, as opposed to more standard like league games where it's all across the pitch. The quality in the box, the moments in the box are slightly higher weighting in terms of their importance, and then also experience in these type of big pressurized games, and world-class talent just to lean on to get you and bring you a moment in a game which can go into a little bit of a lull or can become a little bit stale, just given the slightly cautious measures that each team take. And I think in that sense, Chelsea are definitely ahead of Forest. And with it not really going for Chris Wood, and if you look at the routes to points that he had, right, when he was scoring a bunch of goals, it's very much just get a yard on his man in the box, sharp finish, right? A lot of sharp finishes, and obviously some transitional goals as well, but just a lot of sharp finishes in the box and just being there, right place, right time, the instinct, acting on it, and then obviously the technique to go and finish from a wide variety of different situations within one big group, if you get what I mean. But when that's not going your way and you don't have so many routes to points, for example, you're not like a huge threat on transition, or like the opposition, I'm going to give you so much space in behind and you don't really have the pace to exploit that anyway. You don't take like set pieces. You're not really going to score out from outside the box, so on and so on. Then I think it's a little bit harder to justify holding. So personally, I would be okay selling. Now, there's obviously some like things going for him, right? Not just his form and the quality of the Forest side, which I'll speak about, but also against Chelsea, even with Romeo Lavia playing, we always give you a chance, and we've seen that, right? I think even from like a standpoint of spatially, I think we can be exploited in that sense, and he can exploit us in that sense, right? As opposed to just his standard thing, or like us making a mistake, or them catching us in transition. So with all that being said, I think there are definitely some positives for Chris Wood, just not enough for me to be able to keep him in some spots. where the opportunity cost the other forwards, like for example, Evan Nilsson, so high. Couldn't use expected minutes. This is a bit of a lottery, right? Like, how's anyone really meant to know what's going to happen? Who's not particularly well informed, like within the club. I think that if Strand Larsen starts, he might start on the bench. But like, if not, if they don't have like a true recognized number 9, Peter Pereira might just be like, all right, you know what, go and play, because they do want to climb that league table or at least finish strongly. So that's what I think. But even if Strand Larsen starts, I wouldn't be overly surprised if he gets a send-off for what he's done for the club, maybe subbed off for around like 60, 70 minutes to give him, you know, that moment. And whilst his behavior hasn't been great at times, without him, where would they be? Honestly, maybe in a relegation fight, or they might have already been relegated, right? They were hugely reliant on him. Came up trumps for them so many times, even if his attitude was a bit off, to say the least, right? So I do personally think he'll get some minutes. I personally, like I said, think he starts overall as opposed to bench, but it's close, right? And you're going to have to make your own call. And by all means, follow your own gut. It is your own team, after all. Moving on to the second set of the forwards, and first looking at the Manchester City assets. Is Haaland sellable? He is. And he's especially sellable if he takes up the cash to go and access other players, such as Mohamed Salah, Bukayo Saka, Jared Bowen, or anyone that you would like, right? Even if in that spot you don't want Haaland, you want Evan Nilsson, you think he's just better for this game week, by all means, go and do it. But I do think that, like, it's okay to keep him. Like, say, for example, right, someone has an identical team to you, and you see them move him out for Mohamed Salah, and you don't really want Salah, you can keep Haaland. He still is the best striker in the league. Okay, fine, Isak had a better season than him, and Isak is the second best striker in the league. But Haaland still is the best striker in the league, right? Right, fine. Even if you want to argue that, he's like joint first. He can score goals. And yeah, sure, the City side haven't been great, but like it's always there with him. And you know you'll get a ceiling as well. I personally still think, actually, given the time like between the penalty and the final and now, I wouldn't be surprised if Haaland's back on them by now. But maybe, you know, that's a positive for you, regardless, right? I was also going to move on to myself and Marmoush. But with that factor, ceiling matchup isn't too bad. Like, it's not great. It's not too bad. I think there are still points for him here. And as such, like, you don't have to sell him. But obviously, if you want to, makes total sense. Marmoush's quality and the routes to points, like, and they kind of just go hand in hand. Because of his quality, he has so many routes to points in open play. And he's obviously got set pieces as well. Just look at his goal against Bournemouth, goal of the season contender. Just a very good asset. And it's what I've been saying for a while now, and why I wouldn't be so keen to sell him. Like, he just is a very good asset. Like, he picks up 38 BPS last game with 1 goal. Really, really, really solid. Obviously, Bernardo got 39. But I don't think you need to move him on. I might, if Isak starts and I really want Evan Nilsson, which I do, so then I'll probably do it. But in most cases, I think you can just keep him. And you could even buy him. Even today, I was speaking to someone. They were like, I've got X amount of budget. And it was 7.4 for Marmoush. And I was like, yeah, by all means, just go ahead. Like, I think it makes so much sense. He's really, really good. Evan Nilsson, I spelled it wrong again. How many times am I going to get that wrong? Evan Nilsson, I have spoken about a lot. He's my favorite player to buy that I don't own. Right, him, Saka, Bowen, I consider tier 1. I love it. He has everything he needs in this game to haul. He's got all the right conditions, as I discussed in EYN. And I guess I probably don't need to beat it, but I really, really, really do like him. And I'll come on to the guy who's contending with him for a spot in many teams, given they're at similar price points. But for me, I've decided a while ago, and it's not even too much of a debate. Let's go into some analysis here, right? Because I completely get why Danny Welbeck is increasingly popular. Not only did I consider him earlier this week, but instead of Watkins, I was considering buying him. And I was like, oh, watching that Liverpool game, I was like, maybe I should have bought Danny Welbeck. But some of the factors listed on screen, I think, are going slightly underappreciated. One, his ceiling. Like, he's hit 1 ball this entire season, and that was game week 1 where he got a 12-pointer. Okay? And then you combine that with his finishing, which isn't bad. It's just not like elite level. And if he isn't going to accumulate too many chances, and I'll come on to why, and it's not so good, and just in general, not a high ceiling player, I do think you're capping yourself slightly. And whereas someone like Evan Nilsson, I do think you're accessing a high ceiling, particularly with the fixture, but also what I've seen from him on the pitch. Even though he only has 2 hauls, I think he's far more likely out of the 2 to get one. So that is something I would consider. Spurs' positive pragmatism. I think with all the partying going on, yeah, that's not beneficial for them in terms of winning this game or getting a result. But I do think you'll see less of an Ange rock and roll. I think you'll see more positive pragmatism, especially if they get an early goal. A replication of the performance similar to that away to Brentford earlier in the season. And I think that's bad for Brighton because when they've had to come up against these low/mid blocks, they haven't done quite as well. They also don't have what I would say their biggest key is in João Pedro in the middle to function as a connector. Yeah, Gruder played really well, but I don't think he's the same type of player. And in these type of games that they've had to break down these blocks, they haven't been as good. It's why they've dropped so many points in these quote unquote smaller games. And I think Spurs will, whilst obviously being a much bigger club than some of the other sides you classify to have a smaller game against, they will play maybe somewhat more like it, but with added quality on top, right? So I'm not as convinced that Spurs get rolled over, even with all the partying and drinking for this game. But, obviously I get it, right? Like, for example, I could be wrong. Maybe it's not positive pragmatism. Maybe it's just and rock and roll, highlight and Welbeck exploits here. Brighton create loads of chances. They're all drunk. They don't care. Everyone's just in part of the atmosphere. They get hit for 5 and so on, right? I just don't think that's going to happen, personally. I also think the fact that they won and they're on such like a high, that energy will just translate to somehow grinding out a result against like Brighton, because I don't think Brighton are going to win that game, personally speaking. But yeah, that puts me off, but like I get it. I think it's so justifiable. Gakpo, I prefer Diaz. Like if you can toss that up, obviously one's a mid, one's a forward. The ceiling's there with him. Like got good enough ball striking, got ability to generate assists, particularly from his crosses on the left hand side. The expected minutes I would say are decent to good, anywhere between like 55 to 75 ish. So like 60 is decent, 75 ish is good. And it's okay. I think it's okay. I personally prefer Evan Nilsson in most spots. I would say I prefer Marmoush to him, but I like it enough whereby if you want to go here, I think it's justifiable. Now to do the same for the midfielders. And as I just discussed in the last slide, I like Diaz. Now I will speak about him, or I will speak about things which apply to him more when I get to the Mohamed Salah captaincy section, which is just a replication of the slide yesterday. I'm just going to talk over it again quickly for those who missed it or those who would like me to reiterate some of the points. But analysis-wise, I don't think it's too bad for him at all. I think the conditions could quite suit him. I've also been impressed with him second half of the season. He's looked sharp. He has a big ceiling. Like, he has a high ceiling, especially compared to most players. And he's got the potential to access it, which many others don't. For example, like Semenyo on screen being one of them. Hence why he doesn't have many big scores or any real big scores this season, right? So that is something to consider. Really underrated option, in my opinion. Another underrated option is Bowen. Obviously, I'm captaining him. Obviously, I think he's the best captain. And I've spoken about that at length in EYN. And I'll look at him again quickly for the captaincy section. So I'm not going to repeat myself. But I really do like him. Like I said, I'll speak about that in the captaincy section. Pivott's an interesting one. He's only had a half each in the last 2 games. He's also, Iraola's obviously commented about how a couple of others who play his position might get a start. He'll probably get some minutes regardless. He's almost definitely not even going to see like 70. Forget 90, probably not even 70. So there's not too much security around their asset. I personally think he will start. And then, maybe he only gets a half. Maybe like he gets 50. Maybe he does really well in the first 60. Gets to 60, which is all you really want, right? Like you would take 60 minutes to clive it. And he ends up like getting you a 8, 9, 10, 11 pointer. Or maybe even a haul, right? So there's a lot of, just a lack of security with him. I personally think if you've got him, just start him and just trust that hopefully he makes it to the 60-minute mark and that maybe he can get a return in the first half or the 15 minutes of the second half because he's good enough to do so, right? And it's a little bit difficult to justify him out unless you're in a really luxurious position. If you are, by all means. Then I think it's okay if you don't want to gamble on this like insecurity. And that makes sense, especially where there's so many good options this week. By all means, ship him out. But where you don't, I think just let it run. For me, Semenyo is just about ceiling. I want players with ceiling, like Jared Bowen this week. Like Jared Bowen this week, for myself, at least. I think he's going to return, but that we've already spoken about this week. But going back to it, there is a reason he doesn't haul. Now, you can speculate as to what that is. I have my own theory as to why he doesn't haul. But irrespective of what it is, and whether you're accurate in your thinking or not, there is some truth to the fact that there will be a reason that he just doesn't haul, because he doesn't haul. And I don't think just because it's Leicester at home, all of a sudden you can expect him to turn it on, because we've had this in the past. We've had Southampton away, we've had Southampton at home, we've had Ipswich at home, we've had Ipswich away, we've had other good fixtures as well, and he just doesn't haul. He also tends to do a little bit better in the bigger games, I find. So for me, personally, I think just know what you're buying. Like, you're probably not buying a haul. I think a return, yeah, sure. Even if it's like a 9-pointer, sure. Just probably not a haul. And maybe you want that this week. And Mitoma and Gruder are very similar to Welbeck in the sense that, like, I don't fancy Brighton as much as other people do. But because they're mids, and also they've probably got like higher ceilings, especially like Mitoma and Gruder to an extent, with what I score against Liverpool. If the game is to be that transitional in nature, that basketball-like in nature, then yeah, I don't mind it. But for me, still, I'm personally staying clear of Brighton. Even though I was higher on them earlier in the week. Moving on to the second set of midfielders to discuss. If you are in a very different position to most, and it's looking like you almost have to start one of your Crystal Palace mids, I think it's absolutely okay. I think Liverpool certainly can concede goals. Just look at their performance against Brighton. They could have conceded far more than 3. Alisson made some great saves to keep them out. Secondly, Palace are good enough to score against anyone. There's so much threat in that front line, in the system, in Munoz, in the wing backs, especially with like just the form as well, like when it's going for you. Great, right? So I personally think they'll definitely score. And it's not just going for them, but it's especially going for Eberechi Eze. And when you have the Midas touch, everything turns to gold. And I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow pops up with a goal again, irrespective of the performance, okay? And I think it's probably the best time to play Liverpool because, like we've seen, just on the booze, on the beach, and so on. Maybe a little bit better prepared this week, but they're probably playing a better, more informed side this week to counter that as well. Naturally, Palace won, be on the beach as well. But I just think not so much. Like, we haven't seen as much from them as we have from Liverpool, aside from their maybe 2-day stint before the Wolves game. And then to a lesser extent, Star's stylistic suitability, I think, is also a decent matchup against Liverpool. And you can certainly get returns, if not a haul. But if I had to choose out the two, I'd go for Eze. Because when you've got the Midas touch, it doesn't really matter what you do. Working anyway. Saka, somewhat similar to Bowen, I would say do your best to get him. And that's one thing I didn't say about Bowen. I really would do your best to get him. Still think he's underrated. Don't expect him to be above 80% EO. He's got about 300k transfers in at the moment. Watkins had 800k and that got him to 100%. Bowen started at 30-ish last week. So yeah, maybe maybe even 85%, but you'll still have 115% of him. And I think that's really, really, really good. Maybe a little bit less, to be honest, because people are capturing him as well. But irrespective, I think that's really, really, really good. And I would certainly fancy that transfer, as I would with Bukayo Saka. High floor in this fixture. He'll have so many mini opportunities to return, at least, and a medium to high ceiling. Usually I would say high ceiling, especially due to the player quality and the fixture, with all due respect. But just because he's out of nick and he hasn't maybe looked his sharpest or his fittest as of late, maybe I'll just reduce it a little bit. Rodgers is good, and that's all I have to say. He's good. If you want to start him, I don't think you need to take a hit to replace him. I think he's solid. I don't really love Palmer for this week, but he's good enough where I'm whatever. I'm not going to take a hit. You can run. Rodgers, I think he's good. And it's pretty similar, except I would have his prospects even higher than Palmer's. Or at least a security of one return, right? Certainly got a better fixture as well. And he's in better form. So for all of those reasons, don't think you need to take a hit to replace Rodgers. And lastly, Kevin De Bruyne. Sellable. Absolutely sellable. Because if you actually look at his games, obviously the Bournemouth one is maybe a little bit different and interesting because he does miss an open goal. But outside of that, doesn't really have too many opportunities to return in the game. Not too many. Even against Wolves, gets an 11-pointer. But outside of that, not too... He basically didn't have anything in the game. Palace, no complaints. Good 60 minutes for him. But then Everton, Villa, a couple of other games as well, which have just slipped the mind at the moment. Barely had anything and blank. So I do think you're trying to get a little bit lucky with De Bruyne. You are hoping that he still showcases that one moment type of quality, right? But the thing is, in terms of how many times he's going to arrive in that moment to actually go and do something, especially with the lack of legs in comparison to before and how he used to generate those moments, maybe on transition at times, well, lesser likelihood there. And also, maybe just not the same exact quality as previous times. The injury can't help. Therefore, lesser likelihood as well. Fulham not an easy side. But I don't mind selling him. I really don't. I think either way it's okay. I just don't think it's as much of a sell as maybe some people are making him out to be, on the assumption you have conviction. If you don't, then I think this is a pretty easy move on. If he's a blocker for Saka or Bowen for me, depending on how you view him, and maybe some others. This slide and the next have already been shown this week, including Salah captaincy in team selection and the Bowen captaincy in EYN. But just to cover it again, because I thought it necessary and important, we are here again, but we'll just do it for a short little while. I think Salah will do well. I think he's a good captain. Not a great captain, but a good captain this week. We'll speak about some of the positives. And one thing I will say before I go on to this bit of analysis is that I have the utmost respect for what Palace have done this season, and them as a side. I just think with this particular variable, they really, really, really did struggle. Away at the Etihad, away at St James's Park, they were put up against a high, aggressive press, and they didn't do so well. Now, I think one thing they did is they panicked, right? They didn't put the ball into their pivot as much as they could have done and trusted them, but rather they played these clip balls into the channel, particularly their centre-backs, largely inaccurate balls as well. City centre-backs would get them as opposed to the too wide or too narrow forwards in Eze and Sarr. City would recycle, pin them in their block, and sustain a lot of pressure. There would also be high turnovers. They lost the ball against Newcastle in similar manners as such. And then when you take out their two best ball playing players out of the 5, out of the 3 centre backs and the 2 in the pivot, in Wharton and Gahey, big blow, big blow, especially at Anfield. The thing about the Liverpool press is slightly different in the sense that when it is that 4-2-4, 4-3-3 hybrid, which always is, the front line is, I called it lethargic before, probably not going to use the word because it's not accurate. It's just coached in a way where it's not meant to be as aggressive. But the second you get into a certain zone or a certain depth on the pitch, then they'll jump, right? And I remember the game against Ipswich better than any other, where they won 4-0. And oh my God, every time that ball got past that line of the first line of press, or they were counter-pressing, they were onto them in a millisecond. 4 of them would just jump, get the ball every time. They got the ball again and again and again. If that happens to Palace, I can see them conceding quite a few high turnovers and Salah profiting as a result, right? So those are all the positives, aside from the fact that he's the best player in the league, he's going for the record, and he's at home, right? The negatives include the fact that he hasn't been in great form, is not really going for him. Palace is still a good side. They're in really good form themselves. And yeah, sure, he's going for the record, but he's been going for the record these past 8 weeks as well, and it hasn't really done anything. Like, it hasn't clicked still. So I don't think you can necessarily say, like, oh, just because he's going for the record, he'll definitely go and get it because he's Salah, right? Even though he's the best player in the league. And I think those two counteract each other, especially where Jarrod Bowen exists in his excellence. So those are the two sides to things. And I think they just leave Salah with being a good captain, but not a great captain. Because I think Bowen, for me at least personally, is a great captain and has the potential to haul and showcase that. Well, it's that Salah doesn't. I honestly just think Bowen's haul may be a bit more realistic this week. This will be an even shorter section. There was one thing I wanted to add, and it was one thing that I had not considered until I saw it from FPL Meerkat on X, and he just prompted the thought, so make sure you go and give him a follow, is that it's the last game in the Premier League, they're at home, and maybe they'll give some of the players who helped them come up an opportunity, especially because for a lot of them who will stay with the club, they won't be playing in the Premier League next season, whereas the likes of Liam Delap, like, he's going, right? So like, maybe he doesn't need to start, no biggie, give him 20 minutes at the end, let him say goodbye, but like, just give some other guys minutes who ordinarily wouldn't have had any, which just makes them a weaker side, and it's better for West Ham. Jarrod Bowen, I've spoken about how within their block, like, if you don't have a certain level of 1v1 quality, especially in this league, you need a certain level of athleticism and physicality, and particularly in the midfield, they lack that. I think, especially because West Ham lack that, and they won't have to come up against that probably like the first time in ages, they'll be okay there, and they can prop it. The other thing is Bowen's form and his quality. And then the other thing is, even from a positional standpoint, when he's wide, he still has such a brilliant ability to come inside from those wide areas, travel those distances, and get into advantageous positions to return. And then he can also function in central areas in the half space. He can receive there. He can manufacture returns for himself. And with all those variables, I like it a lot. He was also probably going to be on penalties. I don't think Paquetá is going to play. He's also got so many routes to points just in general, like open play, because he can score headers. That's a big thing, right? Like, when you can get on the end of crosses, he can deliver crosses, you can shoot from a wide variety of angles, ball striking, different spots on the pitch, blah, blah, blah. So for me, there's just a lot of good things that are going for him. And I would say he has like a really high floor, or a high floor and a high ceiling this game week. And as such, he's my preference. This section will be a little bit shorter because I think there is a little bit less to discuss. If you are going to buy a defender, number 1, Ben White. Number 2, Calafiori, because they just have the best chance of keeping a clean sheet, in my opinion. And both those guys have attacking upside. I think White's got better because of the position he plays at fullback, whereas Calafiori will play centre-back. That's that. The tier below, I like Shaw. Like, I like the Newcastle defense as much. You can go whichever Newcastle defender you like. Obviously, Burn and Shaw both have their main asset for scoring goals in the heading department from set pieces. But Everton are good at defending them, so that offsets that a little bit. And yeah, outside of that, I don't really think you need to go anywhere else. You can probably afford like a Livramento, even if you can't afford a Shaw. And you can, if not, if you're like selling someone like Saliba, you can afford anyone anyway, right? So White, Calafiori, and Newcastle should cover everything. And obviously, if not, you can look at the guys who I have in my tier 1. Aside from them, Aston Villa, and then West Ham to an extent. Maybe they should have been bit tier 2. And even Guardiola to an extent, but you're probably not going to go and buy him. And you can go buy there. One quick thing, you know there's no Bournemouth on the slide. I think I discussed this on another slide, but I realise now that there's no Jamie Vardy for the game. Even so, I still think they concede. Obviously, the chance decreases. I just personally think they concede. Hence why I didn't include them in there, because I can't suggest something when I don't like agree with it, right? Like, I get it. If you want to go buy Bournemouth defenders, how can anyone criticize you? It's Leicester at home. I just personally don't like it, so I can't advocate for it. And yeah, in terms of the bench dilemmas, I like Guardiola because if he is to play fullback, ceiling's so high. They keep keeping clean sheets as well in comparison to like early stages in the season. Obviously, I know what happened at the end against Bournemouth, but that is just one little instance. Too much. Like, they had a bit, but not too much. Arsenal, I would play. And then it's tough because if you're going to play Arsenal, let's say you play double with them and Guardiola, you probably only have 2 out of like a Villa, Newcastle, and West Ham from there. So who do you play? I would definitely play your Arsenal defender. Forget the goalkeeper for a second. I would definitely play the Arsenal defender. And I personally would definitely play Guardiola. Obviously, like a lot of you will play Raya over Areola. That I get. I'm doing Areola more so for the ceiling. But then, because I'm doing it more so for the ceiling, when it comes to the defense, if you want to put Wan-Bissaka on the bench, play Konsa ahead of him, play Livramento ahead of him, I completely get that. I think that's completely fine. I really like Konsa as well this week. Like, I always really like Konsa. He's one of my preferred defenders in the game. I really like Konsa for this week. So probably for me, like if I had all of them, I would actually go with what I have in the form of Kiwi or Konsa, Guardiola, and I'd be okay leaving Wan-Bissaka on the bench. Maybe he'd be the last spot. Newcastle, maybe you can push them in there. I think that's completely understandable if you have a preference for that. But I personally just like what I have at the moment. Kiwi or Konsa and Guardiola. Like I said, Newcastle can certainly push their way into that. You could, by all means, drop Guardiola if you want, right? Because at the end of the day, Fulham they probably have the worst fixture City. It's more so the quality that I'm relying on there. But if you didn't want that, you could do that. If you don't think Konsa's going to score again, but you do think Newcastle could get in on the act, like your defender, by all means do that as well. To conclude, we have the assistant manager, which was actually the video which was my most popular video in terms of views this season. So I see it as a fitting end when we rolled around to Gaming 24 and we had that big thing with the announced fixture and the chip strategy changing and so on and so on. I like Vitor Pereira a lot. I think the probability of the combination of a draw and win, right? So the 2 probabilities assigned to each event combined is very healthy. Very, very healthy. I haven't looked at the odds particularly for like the assistant managers, but like at least in my mind with how I interpret the game. It's healthy. I think also this system is not the greatest for Brentford to play against. I think it counteracts it quite well. I think it ensures that you're not going to engage in maybe as aggressive of a game as they would like with the game model that Brentford employ. I would say that this is a lot of just what happens on the day. Because there are so many variables here that counteract each other. You probably assume Brentford could get it done, should get it done because they're a better team. But I do think like following that defeat, following the fact that they're just unlikely to get 8th place now, I think Brighton maybe get a point, right? And obviously they still have to go and win. And the fact that Chelsea, to get Europe, Chelsea would have to finish 7th and win the Conference League. There's just a lot that I don't think is really going their way too much. Whereas Wolves at home, last day, done a really good job since he's come in, Vitor Pereira. Cunha's last game, if he gets to start, so on and so on. There's just so many variables that counteract each other. It's also the last day, right? So part of the analysis just goes out the window and whatever vibe comes up on the day. So I like it a lot because I think that favours Wolves because Brentford are a better side. If you've got one after some thinking and a discussion with someone earlier, I would go Pereira. I like Postecoglou more than most. He's the other table bonus manager I think you could select. The same analysis would apply when I discuss Welbeck and the Brighton boys. I still think Spurs have enough firepower, enough attacking quality, and they play aggressive enough, even within positive pragmatism. Cause Brighton some problems, but if I had to, I would go Pereira. A little bit underrated the Postecoglou. And the non-table bonus, I would really just go Eddie Howe because the clean sheet is worth 2 goals, right? And I said I personally don't think that Bournemouth are going to keep a clean sheet. Therefore, you're already starting 2 goals down on the assumption that Newcastle keep one. But I do think just generally they're more likely. And I think Newcastle could score quite a few goals at home, especially if Isak starts. And you can kind of pair that, right? Say you find out Isak starts. Oh, okay, I want Eddie Howe as well. Isak's EO is going to be quite low. Like, I don't even think it's going to be 50% this week. And he's been the best striker in the league this season, right? Obviously, without him, the prospect isn't as good. And I personally, in every case, would go Vitor Pereira. Like, I think Eddie Howe is justifiable. But I do think Vitor Pereira is out by quite a bit for me, given the table bonus. And I mean quite a bit. Even if he gets a draw, 2-2 draw, right? It's a very standard result for that type of game. 10-pointer. Okay, fine. Eddie Howe could win, 4-0, and he'd still only get 2 more points. For me, by miles, I'm picking Vitor Pereira. The point that I didn't even want to discuss it right earlier. But I think it's good, because I think they'll win something like 3-1. Just lack ceiling. Vitor Pereira could just literally get a draw and get the same or outscore him. Vitor Pereira is my option. And that concludes the final section of the season. And that is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. And that's all she wrote for the season, at least before it's finished. I may do a video recapping what happened in the final gaming, like literally a 5-10 minute video. But if not, then this will be the last time until I see you to do it all over again. Again, thank you so much for all your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Do comment under the post that I put up with my final standings, how you did and whatever you would like to say, if not this video at least. I wish you all the very, very, very best of luck for the final game week of the season. I hope all of your arrows are green. I hope you get the finish you want, both in mini leagues and your overall rank. I shall see you on the other side. Thank you again once so much, and have a wonderful summer if I do not speak to you beforehand. Goodbye.